there and say, I think there's some further discussion here.
It still says the battery is low. And this is a battery shot. Sorry,
Thank
took this
you.
so long.
That's okay.
Christine, you're looking well. I presume you've got all your prescriptions.
Yeah, that happens. They get cool.
No.
Good, I told you. I see that.
I don't have
Christmas?
shopping.
Christmas. 3 weeks from yesterday.
It's nice.
Yeah, you're almost dying. I heard that again.
Let's get the game right.
Gets easier when they get older.
Christmas, Don, I gotta tell you, I know you love cherry pies, right?
Yes, I
I have found a lady who makes the best cherry pie. I had ordered 2 for today. I stopped to pick them up and she had forgotten to bake them.
Oh.
For Christmas, you are getting a made from scratch cherry pie, the best one I've had in my life.
Oh, my God, you're kidding.
Let's please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Couple things first. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas. As Ben says, you got 3 weeks to do your shopping.
I'll take something nice and easy if anybody's thinking.
I just heard you're getting a cherry pie.
Well, yeah, pies work.
I unfortunately have to leave by 10 o'clock. I have a family thing to attend to, so in the event we're not complete, which I hope we are.
Good luck by looking at the agenda.
John will take over from wherever we have to leave off.
I gotta leave at 9:30.
Morning, Lisa.
We weren't laughing at you.
Not this time.
So, good morning, everyone. It's December 5th, happens to be my wife's birthday too, on top of everything. And this is our December meeting for the JCLDC. I will open it to the floor. Anyone on the floor? No comments from the floor. We received minutes from our November 7th meeting. Is there any additions and or corrections?
Make motion be accepted.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. We have our auditors here, and I'm going to ask that, so that they don't have to sit around for the next couple hours. We're going to have them do the LDC audit, and then from there, we will have them present the JCADA audit. And when we get to the JCADA, we'll make a vote to accept the audit at that point.
All right, Brian Olson, I'm the audit supervisor from Bowers Company, and here with me today is Liz Bush, she's the audit partner. So I'll try and keep these as quick as possible. It was a pretty straightforward year for both audits, not a lot of activity with loans. They were both very good audits. Lyle and staff did a great job. There was no management letter comments, no material journal entries, so overall both audits were very, very clean. So starting with the JCLDC, top of page 2 is the opinion. So most important part of the audit, in our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So that's a clean, unmodified opinion, that's what you want. Below that, you'll see there is an emphasis of matter this year for JCLDC, and that just relates to the implementation of accounting standards update 2614, which is adopted by all not-for-profits in the current year. Our opinion was not modified with respect to this matter. There's just 3 changes that were the result of that, and I'll go through those as I go through the financials. On page 3 is the statement of financial position or your balance sheet. So just focusing on the current year activity. Cash at year end of 2.6 million. Loans receivable of 669,000. Other receivables of 9,400 and prepaid expenses of 2,600. So total current assets of 3.3 million. Property equipment net of accumulated depreciation of 53,000. Bringing your total assets down to 3.3 million. A little bit of AP at year end, just over 12,000. Expenses of 40,000 and unearned revenue of 76,000. You'll see that unearned revenue has increased quite a bit from the prior year. to $41,000 that was received for the records management grant, which is expected to be completed in 2020. And what's left over is your net assets. So this is the first change. So it used to be unrestricted temporarily and permanently restricted net assets. Now it's just two classifications. All the LDCs are considered net assets without donor restrictions. They don't receive any donor contributions, unfortunately. So your undesignated net assets were just over 3.2 million. Statement of activities on page 4. Support revenue from the county of just over 414,000. Grant income of 26,000. The administrative fees paid from the IDA was 298,000. So that was actually able to be made in the current year due to the improved cash flows. Interest on loans receivable just over 41,000. Other interest income of 3,700 and miscellaneous income of 4,800 for a total support revenue of 789,000. Your expenses, you see breakdown by program there. There's a separate schedule on the next page I'll go over. But total expenses were 1.2 million, bringing a total change in net assets of a loss of 417,000. So on page 5 is the statement of functional expenses. So this is presenting your expenses by natural classification and by program. This was another change with the accounting standard update. So we broke it out by program in more detail. So the agriculture, marketing, economic development. Basically, the standard just said you can't just break out your program versus management and general expenses by just random percentages anymore. So we used to take total expenses and allocate 70% program, 30% management and general. Now there has to be a actual method of allocating the expenses. So majority of the expenses for the LDC are based on direct identification. So Lyle has the expenses broke out by agriculture, marketing, economic development, and the other expenses that aren't directly identified are allocated based on time and effort. So your pay, salaries and benefits are allocated based on time and effort. So just focusing on 2019, not a lot of changes compared to the prior year. The biggest change, I guess, would be the bad debt expense of 182,000. And that was based on a write-off for a non-performing loan that the LDC wasn't expected to collect on. So overall, total expenses for the year, 1.2 million compared to 979,000 in the prior year. If you back out that $182,000 bad debt expense, it was really a $44,000 increase in expenses, or 4%. So pretty consistent on the expense side. Statement of cash flows on page 6. So this is just going from the accrual to the cash basis. Net cash used by operating activities of 171,000. Net cash that was provided by investing activities driven by the collection on loans was 291,000, bringing an overall increase in cash for the year of 120,000. Page 7 starts notes of financial statements. Note 2 being significant accounting policies. These are really the drivers of financial statements. There weren't a lot of significant changes here, so I'll skip ahead to page 10. Note 3, loans receivable. So this just gives you a schedule of the outstanding loans as a year end. For the LDC, there was no new loans issued in the current year. And overall, there was a decrease of around 479,000 in loans receivable. And that's just due to the contractual paydowns and the write-off. On page 11, one of the more important notes of the loans, just a breakdown of the aging. So you'll see for the LDC, they're all current as of year end. So that's good to see. On page 12, it's just a breakdown of the property equipment. So you'll see there is some work in progress at year end for the record storage. As I mentioned, there was the grant monies received for that. They're expected to be completed in 2020. Related party transactions, there was no new transactions noted in the current year, so those are all pretty consistent with the prior year. I'll skip ahead to note 7 on page 14, concentrations of credit risk. So just key to point out that there was no bank balances that were in excess of FDIC or collateral limits as of year end. And the last change with the county standard update is note 9. This is a new note. And this just really breaks out the LDC's financial assets at year end and then backs out assets that are not available in the next year. So this really just gives users with financial statements a better understanding of where the LDC sits at year end in order to meet their operating expenses in the next year. So you'll see financial assets available to meet general expenditures in the next year of 2.8 million. Compare this to your expenses of 1.2 million, you're in good shape. And we have some not-for-profits where that number's negative, so don't worry about that. The last report here is the independent audit report in accordance with government audit standards. So there's a key thing to note here that during our testing, there was no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported. And the loose leaf attachment in the back is just the communication with governance at the conclusion of an audit. So a few things to point out here. Most significant estimates affecting financial statements were management's estimate of whether or not to book the allowance for bad debt and the estimate for depreciation. Overall, there was no difficulties encountered in performing the audit, no corrected or uncorrected misstatements, no disagreements with management, and no other audit issues or findings. So like I said, overall, very, very clean audit.
And I'd like to add for next year, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
For the year ended 2020, there will be another new not-for-profit standard that'll be implemented. It won't be as pervasive as the new standard that was issued this year, but what it will deal with is revenue recognition. I think it'll have a minimal impact on the JCLDC. It's more geared for if you have membership dues and things of that nature, you'll see a significant impact on those financial statements. The only thing I can see that would make changes, the unearned or deferred revenue might be reported slightly differently. But we'll keep you apprised of the changes during the year and let you know about that for next year end. So.
Questions for the auditors and the LDC audit?
I should note for staff, these guys have been great to work with this year, and we appreciate them drinking all our coffee. Other than that, it was really a good session. Thank you guys for doing a good job.
I entertain a motion or a second to
I'll
accept
make
the audit.
to accept the audit of the JCLDC.
I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries, thank you. We'll do the IDA audit at this time, please.
Yep.
Do you want to do the 911?
So we don't have the 990 with us today. So we,
We'll do it next.
yep, so we have that draft form. I'll email it over to you after the meeting. Yeah, so for the IDA, little thicker financials, this includes all the information for the IDA, LDC, and the JCC FTC. So top of page 2, similar to the LDC, the opinion, most important part of the financial statements. So in our opinion, financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects, in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So again, for IDA, clean, unmodified opinion. On pages 4 to 15 is management's discussion analysis. So this is prepared by management and really just gives the readers of the financial statements a good overview of what happened during the year. I'll let you read that at your own leisure. Skip ahead to page 16. Page 16 is the combined statement of net position. So with this, any intercompany receivables or payables are eliminated. So I'll just focus really on the highlights here. So total current assets at year end of 3.7 million. Total restricted assets, which includes cash and loans receivable of 5.8 million, and total non-current assets of 1.7 million. So for the IDA, year-end assets of 11.2 million. Deferred outflows of resources, so this is really just for pilot monies that are receivable at 387,000. Down to liabilities, total current liabilities of 203,000. current liabilities payable from restricted assets of $5,500 and non-current liabilities of $200,000. For the deferred inflows of resources, due to other governments for pilot monies received, $431,000. And what's left over is just your net position, total net position here on $10.8 million. Page 17, statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. This also has eliminations for any intercompany activity. Total operating revenues just over $1 million, and total operating expenses of $1.5 million. So for the IDA, net operating loss of $460,000. There were some non-operating revenues of $164,000. So overall, there was a change in that position, loss of just over $295,000. On page 18 is the statement of cash flows. Again, going from the accrual to the cash basis. Net cash provided by operating activities of $384,000. Overall, net increase in cash for the IDA of $302,000. Page 20 starts the notes to the financial statements. Note 1, summary of significant accounting policies. Again, these are the drivers of financial statements. No significant changes either for the IDA, so I'll jump ahead to page 25. Note 2, just want to note that at year-end deposits were fully collateralized by either FDIC insurance or collateral held in the IDA's name. Note 3, loans receivable. So this just gives a breakdown between the LDC's and the IDA's loans. So you'll see at year-end there's loans of just over $1.5 million. Skip ahead to page 29, as there really wasn't a lot of activity in the loans this year for the IDA. On the bottom of page 29, again, here's the presentation of the aging of loans receivable. For the IDA, there were a few loans that were past due, 2 to be exact. One was in the 30 to 59 past due bucket of $21,000, and there was one loan greater than 90 days for just over $7,000. But the rest are current, so around 98% of the loans receivable are current as of year-end. On page 30, restricted assets. So this just gives a breakdown of what makes up the restricted cash that was on the statement of net position. So you'll see the RLF cash of $3.7 million, micro enterprise cash of $61,000, city loan fund of $117,000, pilot program cash of $44,000, and the capital improvement reserve of just over $1 million. Key thing to note below the restricted cash, so as of September 30th, 2019, Convergys did give the agency notice that they will be terminating the lease. So the board did approve releasing any restrictions from that capital improvement reserve in order to fund those expenses that are now the obligation of the IDA for the foreseeable future. On page 32, just gives a breakdown of the capital assets. You'll see in the current year there was increases of $110,000. So this was $5,000 of that was for the LDC's record storage, and $105,000 was for the airport project. That project really doesn't have a end in sight, from what I've heard, so that'll probably stay in wet the foreseeable future.
You are the master of understatement.
Note 8, pilot program. So as I mentioned on the statement of net position, pilot monies receivable as of year end of $387,000 and payable of $431,000. That difference is really just due to timing of receipts and payments. The IDA, though, does not report any revenues or expenses related to pilot programs, as they're just passed through. Note 9 on page 33, long-term debt. There's no changes with this. On page 34, commitments and contingencies. So just key thing to point out, as of year end, the IDA had no commitments for loans that had not been completed. And on page 36, starts the supplemental schedules and additional information. So the first two are the combining statements of fund position, net position, and revenues and expenses. So this just takes your IDA information and components being the LDC and the JCC, FDC, and eliminates any intercompany activity. So I won't go over the first one since we've already gone over LDC and the IDA. I'll just note that there were no eliminations on the balance sheet. On page 37, for the income statement, there were a few eliminations. In total, there was just over $665,000 of activity that was eliminated for the admin service agreement and the RLF micro fee income. On page 38 and 39 is just the combining information for LDC and the JCC FDC. Again, since I've already gone over LDC, I'll just note that for the JCC FDC at year end, we're sitting on cash of just over $10,800. And on page 39 for the JCC FDC, only activity in the current year was administrative fees of $5,000. Last two schedules are the combined schedules for the different programs for the IDA. So you have your general RLF, micro, and city. So I'll just focus on the RLF, micro, and city activity, as the rest is just classified as general. So for RLF at year end, sitting in cash of just over 3.7 million and loans receivable of 378,000. Micro had cash of 61,000 and loans receivable of 295,000. And the city loan program had cash of 117,000 and loans receivable of 116,000. All of their net position is considered restricted for those programs. And then on the revenues, expenses, change in net position side, interest from loans receivable for RLF of 31,000, 13,000 for micro, and 6,700 for the loan program. And then down the expenses, just admin fees and some bad debt recovery. And the last report is for audits performed in accordance with the government auditing standards, and similar to LDC, there were no instances of non-compliance or other matters required to be reported. The investment report is required by Paris. This just states that there was no investments held as of year end. And the last loose leaf attachment, communication with governance. So significant estimates affecting financial statements were management's estimate of depreciation, management's estimate for allowance for loan loss, and the estimate for the value of the administrative and staff support services. But overall, no difficulties encountered, no uncorrected misstatements, no disagreements, no other issues or findings. So again, with IDA, very clean audit, no major comments.
Any questions for our auditors for the IDA audit?
Well, the comptroller auditors request to meet with these guys. Do they want to meet with these guys or no?
We talked to them the first day on site. They didn't really have any questions for us. They kind of do their own thing.
The financial end of it is not what they're focusing on right now.
It's process.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Because, may I, Mr. Chair, make a quick comment? First of all, I think the board should understand the quality of the work that Lyle does for our agency. I think all of us do. But this is, again, another example of his leadership. Working with Joy and Peggy, I think they present Brian and Liz a pretty smooth path to getting this thing done. And from a management point of view, I want to thank Lyle particularly for all the good work he's done over the years. And
We can't do it alone.
well, you don't, nobody does, but your leadership is important. Also, Brian and Liz brought up something that we've been talking about for a while, and that is the decline in pilots and loans. And you see these things happening in our audit, and it's very troublesome from a staff point of view. It's an issue we're trying to deal with, and frankly, not quite sure how to offset our concerns about where the revenue for the future for the organization will come from and how effective we can be as pilots and loans are under attack from various quarters. And although we're doing the best we can to keep the the ship afloat long range, it's an issue the board is gonna have to look at and try to find out how to come up with some answers to that. So I just, this is a snapshot of our present condition, but it also is a telltale snapshot of what the future can be if we don't change those things around. So anyway, just wanted to make the observation. Again, thanks to the audit team for really good work. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Then we have a public hearing at 8:30.
Yeah.
8:30 sharp.
8:30 sharp is what the law says.
So we have some time because we did part of the JCIDA one.
Do you need more than 5 minutes for the treasurer's report?
No, we're on target to hit our budget. And the report.
I'm going to accept the treasurer's report.
God, you get it.
Second. All righty. I guess at this time I want to make a motion, I'd like a motion to, do we adjourn? We don't adjourn.
Suspend,
Yeah.
table, whatever.
Yeah, you can adjourn for,
We're going to adjourn for a public hearing. I then entertain a motion, a second for that, please.
Did we finish the treasurer's report? I said it jokingly, but did you?
We need a.
I made a
You didn't-
motion.
I don't think anybody seconded.
We have a motion and a second.
Okay, I didn't get a second, that's okay. We moved right ahead with my joke.
It was a joke.
No, it wasn't. That was the report.
Okay. On the motion to accept the treasurer's report as presented, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Carried. I just didn't want short and sweet.
I move that we adjourn.
We do
for
have
a
sample
public hearing.
questions, so.
yeah.
Motion to adjourn for public hearing, do I have a second? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. We have the official clock.
Come on.
It's like
8:27.
Takes longer for me to read the minute.
According to Verizon, it's 8:27.
Is anybody out there that wants to be here for this?
I'm hoping, Larry, I haven't had a chance to go out yet. I'm hoping that re-energy people will have arrived by now, but I'm not sure that they will. In the meantime, as we get on with the public hearing, I'm going to pass around a sign-up sheet. Would you all please put your name and so on that sheet so we can put that in the records?
Do you have minutes from the public hearing on Oswego? Do we get those before today? I mean, before we vote, is there minutes kept?
David conducted the hearing and was.
I have the live stream of it. That was when we ran our first test, and nobody came.
Well, Paul is looking for the report, and I don't blame him.
I think if
I
Dave.
mean, the last time,
Dave
last
gives-
public hearing, you gave us a report.
I think if Dave gives a verbal report, that would.
Yeah, David, the question comes that we finished the report on the public hearing for.
Yes,
beverage.
nobody showed up, there were no comments.
But typically, what we do is we summarize that and give a report.
Yeah, we've got minutes.
My apologies.
No.
Okay,
Wait, 8:30.
yeah. Otherwise-
Thanks again.
Yes, 30 seconds.
If you and John both leave at 10, is it Ed or me that's third to have to chair the meetings if they're not done?
I think John was kidding.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, I thought he was actually serious.
He said he was leaving at 9:30.
Oh, I thought he was serious.
Okay, I'm not sure.
I don't know what John.
You don't know it, John. That's why I thought he was actually serious.
So Peg's getting the minutes, right? Basically, we just, called it to order, read out the resolution, no comments, so just Marshall and I were there and closed the hearing 2 minutes later, so.
Like this public hearing.
Yeah, we're about to have, in most public hearings, except the one that, yeah.
It takes you longer to read that page.
Oh, it does, and I'll just start. Chairman. Okay. It's 8:30. We have a public hearing to conduct. This is necessary because the Green Energy Corporation would like the IDA board to consent to amendments called a reissuance of those bonds. And so with that, I'll convene the public hearing. I have to read the rules of the public hearing, which I now will do. At a duly called regular meeting of the Jefferson County Industrial Development Agency held at 800 Starbuck Avenue, Watertown, New York, on the 5th day of November 2009, it was announced that among the purposes of the meeting is to consider adopting rules for public hearings conducted by the agency. At the discussion, the following resolution was moved by Mrs. Paff, seconded by Mr. Berto, and unanimously carried that the following will be the rules for all agency public hearings. The hearing officer will read the resolution of the board authorizing public hearing. 2, each speaker will be limited to 5 minutes. 3, a speaker may not be permitted to relinquish all or part of his or her allotted time to another speaker. 4, written comments may be accepted and included in the minutes. 5, they may, but do not have to be read aloud at a hearing, and we've made it a practice to do so. 6, all comments by any speaker must be addressed to the hearing officer, and there shall be no dialogue or open debate between members of the public during the hearing. Number 7, the hearing officer will not answer questions or make comments, and there shall be no dialogue between the hearing officer and the public. 8, each speaker must introduce himself or herself by name and address. The hearing officer may be required, anyone wishing to speak, to sign in with their name and address, and then take the speakers in order of signing. 9, each speaker is limited to a single opportunity. 10, only one speaker shall have the floor at a time, and others present shall remain silent until it is their opportunity to speak. 11, no demonstration shall be permitted which will disrupt the hearing. If anyone has demonstration signs, they will be required to leave them at a location designated by the hearing officer. 12, disturbances may result in the suspension of the hearing and the removal of any offending party at the sole discretion of the hearing officer. The hearing officer may limit a speaker to less than 5 minutes if his or her comments are repetitive and may have already been addressed by other speakers. The hearing officer shall announce these rules at the beginning of the hearing. And I am Don Alexander, and I am representing the agency as the hearing officer this morning. With that, I open the floor to anyone who wishes to comment about the matter at hand. And I want to stop for a moment and take the opportunity to introduce Larry Richardson and Bill Ralston. Larry and Bill represent the Re-Energy Company. And Bill and Larry, I don't know if you want to comment during the public hearing, after, when we're a little less formal, that would be your option.
Well, I would certainly say whatever you believe is more appropriate.
All right, since this is the matter of the reissuance, and if anyone were here to comment, they would like to hear that explanation. So, or at least the status of what's going on. So, Larry, if you wouldn't mind, you and Bill, would you give us a little update on what's happening, why we're here?
Certainly. I am Larry Richardson. I am the CEO of Re-Energy Holdings, and Bill Ralston is the Chief Risk Officer. And we just appreciate the opportunity to be here today for the business at hand. And I think Bill will certainly describe in a little bit of detail the proposed action here that we are bringing to you all. But just a quick backdrop, you may be familiar with the Re-Energy Black River biomass energy facility that is located inside the fence at Fort Drum. And since November of 2014, we have been providing 100% of the electricity needs for Fort Drum through this source of energy, which is renewable and secure and resilient. And really, since the beginning of the project, the IDA has been very supportive of the initiative that we've undertaken. We've deployed a meaningful amount of capital, certainly in the ballpark of $50 million in the aggregate to accomplish the transition and conversion of the facility from coal, using coal as a fuel source, to biomass as a fuel source. And our relationship with Fort Drum in providing them 100% of their electricity supply has been very successful from a technical perspective. And you may be aware, having seen some recent media coverage, over the last 2 years or so, we have been in some discussions with the Department of the Army to address their request and desire to make some pretty significant modifications to our contract, which would have had a profoundly negative impact on the facility and its viability. But very recently, the Department of the Army has communicated to us that they intend to stand down on this initiative to restructure our contract and really adhere to the terms of the contract as it has been in place. So we were very pleased to get that news from the Department of the Army. And with the proposal that is in front of you today to restructure the debt on the project, as this will hopefully be a very successful initiative, it really puts the project in a safe harbor for the foreseeable future. So we're very excited about that. And once again, to talk a little bit about the proposed restructuring. Bill?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Bill Ralston. So back in 2014, right after we signed the contract with the Army, the IDA issued just over $20 million of tax-exempt bonds. And that was used to construct the interconnection system that we built between our facility and the 2 substations on Fort Drum, so that we could supply Fort Drum in a behind-the-meter, configuration and isolate them from the grid. And at the time the bonds were issued, as is typical, 10% of the bonds, just over $2 million, were put into what's called a debt service reserve fund, which is sort of a rainy day fund, if needed down the road. And as part of this restructuring, we're using part of that rainy day fund, reducing the required balance in it and using a portion of it to pay the debt that's the principal and interest that's due on January 1st. And then going forward, the payments, we have more flexibility in terms of, what principal payments we need to make based on the cash flows that are generated by the facility, rather than having a fixed, payment schedule. So that'll just give us the ability, again, to do what we can going forward over the remaining term of the bonds. And those are the primary changes that are being made.
Hearing officer's not really supposed to make comment, but since no one else is apparently going to do so, tell the board that we've been working directly with Larry and Bill for a number of years now. Larry and I went out and pounded on a number of doors from some of our local taxing jurisdictions, explaining what was being proposed in years ago when the conversion to the biomass from the coal facility, and more importantly, perhaps setting Fort Drum up as the first in the world, I believe, if not the nation, that is totally supplied independently by an alternative energy source. Fair to say, Larry?
Yes.
And the other thing that I would like you to comment on, one of the things that has been so important for us is that not only do you employ a number of people at the facility, but you've managed to create a kind of satellite business for those who are collecting biomass for use in your facility. Could you talk about the impacts of those?
Certainly. Yes. Our feedstock, our fuel supply, we purchase from logging companies that operate in the North Country, probably within a 75-mile radius plus or minus of the facility. And what we are doing is providing an additional revenue stream to those logging companies because the only thing that we take in as fuel are the residues when they go in to harvest the higher value timber for sawmills, pellet mills, paper mills, everything that's left over, the treetops, the slash, the small diameter trees that they have to clear to get to that higher value timber. That material gets chipped up and transported to our facility. And our estimates of the number of jobs that we support in the North Country through that supply chain approaches about 200 additional jobs that are created and sustained here in the North Country. So it really does accomplish the kind of the fundamental objectives of the IDA that your cooperation and support of the project has created and is now sustaining literally several hundred jobs here in the North Country.
And last comment I would make, your energy committee led by Father Bill over here is looking at a number of alternative energy projects in our county. But I would offer that Larry and Bill were on the forefront of the development of alternative energy sites here in the community. And we had to plow a lot of new ground, and I don't mean to take any responsibility for that. You guys did it, but it was certainly nice to see us moving in the direction that has been espoused as important for the community in the years ahead. So we're delighted to hear about the contract firming up with the Army. That was a troublesome issue, and that's behind us. And again, we want to thank you too for the kind of work you're doing in our community support.
Thank you very much.
The 10% Rob also on JCIDA board. The 10% reserve that you intimated was initially set forth. Who required it? Was it the bonding company, or was it our agency? Was it you? And how and why is it relieved now, and to what value?
It was the bondholders, the underwriters who we sort of negotiated with the bondholders, and that's pretty traditional in a tax exempt deal. And it's originally, it's 10%, but it's about 1 year's debt service for both principal and interest. And it's being reduced down to about $700,000, which represents 12 months of just interest on the remaining bonds that are outstanding. There's about just over 13 million of the original 20 million that's still outstanding.
So to clarify, you're reducing it to 700,000, not 700,000 being reduced.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Any other comments or questions? Ed?
This new contract, what's the terms on it? So you'll know for sure, like 5 years, 10 years down the road, that your commitment and revenue stream is fixed.
Well, when you say new contract, you mean the contract with the Army? With the Army, that was a 20-year contract, so that goes through 2034.
Now, they simply agree to the existing terms, didn't they? Right?
No, it's not. No, they basically almost 2 years ago approached us and wanted to modify the original terms we were negotiated back in 2014. And after a lot of back and forth, they agreed, no, they don't want to modify it. They'll keep it as is. So it was more or less a, back and forth to renegotiate that didn't end up in any changes to the original contract.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll move the resolution as presented. Oh, no.
No, not yet. I have to close the public hearing.
It's part of the ADA business.
Sorry.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Are there any other comments for the public hearing? Are there any other comments for the public hearing? And lastly, I have to say again, are there any further comments for the public hearing? If not, I declare the public hearing closed. It is at 10:43 a.m. 9, just as I said, 8:43 on Thursday. So the public hearing is now closed, and we're now back in whatever regular operation we have disrupted. So
with that, I will call back to order the Jefferson County Local Development Corporation.
You mean the IDA or no?
We're in the LDC still.
This is IDA.
That's That is for the IDA.
That's
Sorry for the confusion.
We had to go, I forgot, yeah.
And with that, we'll go to our committee reports. Father Bill.
Well, compared to last month, our committee didn't do a lot. We are still working with Mr. Norbert, his project in the town line, still moving slowly. And I guess we did work a little bit with Oya and their pilot agreement that I guess is on Joe's lap.
That had to do with modifications should they decide to put storage system in, correct?
That is incorporated in the pilot agreement.
Joe, you want to, well, Bill's
Yeah,
talking about this, you want to?
Yeah, I drafted a pilot agreement for one of the projects, which I provided to Bill and he presented it to Oya. It included the schedule. They had a couple of modifications, I think. But my understanding is they've approved that form, and we just have to create the other 3 schedules to provide to them, which we should have out next week. And, we'll then be ready to move forward with the approving resolutions. So.
Bill, I don't know whether we'll end up with a request to try to conduct something before the end of the year or not. I don't know exactly what the status would be with respect to their ability to track support. So it may be we end up looking at the possibility, if the board agrees, the chairman agrees, with a special meeting to simply approve these pilots. Joe, does that make sense, Bill? And
yeah, I mean, we'll have everything ready. I mean, as long as they've approved the basic pilot form that we provided and we get an agreement on the schedules, we'll be ready to move forward. And that should be, I should have those ready, midweek next week at the latest.
So with the couple projects you've been working with, and I know that there's several other community projects, in the works. I know there's one in Luray that's going through the town planning board now.
I can tell you, not to interrupt, but I got a list, or maybe Marshall requested this, but we got a list from the county and they've got like 25 different projects in different, some of them they say just heard it through the grapevine, but there's, so there's up to 25.
So are you close, are we close to developing a blueprint, a kind of a direction how we, without?
Somewhat, but the thing that comes to play is like Oya now is adding batteries. One developer has a tracking system for their solar panels, some don't, so that makes a difference in their revenue, which bottom line makes a difference in the per megawatt abatement number. So yes and no. We kind of got an underlying idea, but with the different revenue for a 5 megawatt site is different. So I guess the answer is yes and no. We kind of have a fundamental understanding, but again, the bottom line is how much revenue they can make, because that's what the appraisal and everything else is based on.
So basically, we're going on revenue. We're basing this on,
yes,
on a revenue base. Okay.
just one other quick comment. Bill mentioned the fact the county is mapping these. Marshall has been also mapping these for a while now. And we understand the development authority is also mapping, but each one of the mappings are being used for a different purpose. Our interest is primarily where these projects are in the application process, the size of the projects, the location of the county, so we have some notion about some more specific information that we want to use so that the energy committee can evaluate all these things. So, but we still work in concert with the county and with the development authority, trying not to miss anything. And we typically get calls, probably 1 or 2 a week now, from these both community and commercial solar project folks looking for some information, but at the moment, unless they are serious about an application, to us, they're really just tire kickers, and we'll have to see how they play out. We make note that they call and offer our service, but that's about as far as we go. So
Back to what Dave said, I think, and Bill and I think we talked in the committee, there's two different types of projects. There are those that are less than 25 megawatts, which go through local zoning. One of the reasons why Oya went so well is they showed up at our door with permits in hand from the community. Okay, all these Article 10s are being approved by the state, probably a 2.5-year process. And I think we need to have how we're going to handle the locally approved projects and the larger projects. You know, do we want to get involved on the fork at the very beginning of a 2-year process and then spend a lot of effort until they actually have an application that's deemed compliant in front of the PSC? And still after that point, there's 2 more steps, which are probably over a year till they get a permit. So I think at some point, the Energy Committee's got to have set, how are we going to handle these larger projects? Not just about the process, but there's growing concerns about the impact on agriculture on these large projects, where the smaller ones, you can place them around in areas. So I think there's still a lot of determinations that have to be done on these larger projects. Yeah. Some of these are like are the size of the ones that are out behind Davidson's. They're not big, but some of these are 2,000 acres, a couple square miles. So how we approach those, I think there's more discussion that needs to happen.
I'll chime in on that. 2 concerns I see. I'm kind of surprised that the county's got 25, yet I'm not surprised when you look at all the activity. Those 25 projects on the drawing board right now, if you sort through them and even say you come up with half a dozen of them, that's substantial. We're at a point, and we're going to be right in the middle of it, because none of these projects are going to move forward without some kind of a pilot. So that brings it to our doorstep. So there's a considerable revenue stream from these projects that are on the drawing board right now in the form of pilots. That's very advantageous for the county. But along with it is coming this land use concern, and particularly for agriculture, but not even for agriculture. Some of it's going to be scenic even. So 2 issues, because we're in the crosshairs somewhat with these projects, are land use planning as it relates to agriculture, and considerable tax revenue stream coming from renewable energy. How are we going to deal with it?
Well, that's part of my concern. Next week, there's a farmland preservation board meeting. And I really think we should be encouraging them as the farmland protection board to start to consider becoming a party to these larger projects. That way they have an opportunity, a seat at the table when they do the stipulations, designing what type of reports they're needed, so you can get the developers to pay for these reports to help determine what the impacts are going to be. And that's done before they have a compliant application. And I talked to Doug Shelmendine, and he has concerns, Father Bill, whether the county would support the Farmland Protection Board seeking party status. So I think that's something that has to be worked out between the county and their appointed board. But I think it makes sense to have a board that's their function, looking at those impacts.
I'll share something I shared with Bill over coffee, and I think it's noteworthy. Because these projects are eating up open land space, that ties back to the trend that has taken place in agriculture of consolidation. The larger dairies growing to the point they are. They've only been able to do that because they've been able to access this land base from the small farms that have called it quits. So many of these large farms, I'd say most of them, probably half of their land mass that they're actually actively cropping to be sustainable is from rented properties from the other landowners. They're probably collecting $100 to $150 an acre in annual rent revenue. With a solar array on their property, they're looking at probably close to $2,000 an acre in annual revenue. So those landowners, if they have the opportunity to convert land, guess where they're going? So it's leaving some of these large dairies at real risk of becoming overnight unsustainable because they're losing half of their land mass. This is going on in Western New York and 3 or 4 dairies I know of right now. They're really sweating. They're saying, if we're going to lose 500 acres of our 2,000 acre land mass, we can't operate. We've either got to cut this dairy in half or shut it down. So that's coming out on the drawing board, and it's going to hit us right here. This project with Borlex, I think, is going to be a classic example.
Dave, just to share with you too, I don't know if we recorded this to you yet, but Jay and I actually went to a meeting here about a week or so ago, which was with our agency, Cooperative Extension, County Planning, Development Authority, North Country, Soil and Water, and various other ag-related agencies, kind of talking about this solar development for ag land from a big picture point of view, kind of starting to share information and documentation. So a lot of communication is happening. Just be aware of that. We'll be sharing stuff back and forth with the agencies. So we're kind of taking a broader view of this stuff too, to kind of see how it all interrelates, and sharing there's best practice guidelines from Department of Agriculture, from the land trust organizations. So we're working on some of that stuff now. So that is getting back to the farmland, the Ag Protection Board and such.
I think my main concern is that we don't get out in front of ourselves without knowing all the potential impacts.
And that's what we're discussing this evening.
I think that's important. If we learned anything from Gulu is that you get down the road, things change, and should we wait a while before we really get involved in working with these projects other than background? I mean, what type of studies do we need? One of my concerns from serving on the FDRO Wind Committee was there were like 4 or 5 wind farms proposed, and there was concerns at that time about the impact on the radar. And we talked about trying to get a cumulative impact, not just of an individual wind farm. And it got no traction because the PSC is looking at that application. And I think when we know we got 25 projects, we got to find a way to look at the cumulative impact of these and not just individual projects. Because that's where the real issue that Ed is talking about. Because I talked to an assessor in Western New York, and she echoed what they said. A lot of farmers are nervous because people have signed intents to do leases to solar farms that traditionally have leased it to farmers. So that's a real issue that's occurring out in Western New York.
Yeah, so we will be meeting again, but as part of, like your point, Paul, that's what this group is trying to do, is make sure we get enough the information that we can, the various agencies, we can all better advise boards like our board, protection board.
Does it make sense to have 3 agencies plotting these projects differently, or should we have coordinated plotting of these projects and tracking of them? So everybody knows how Yank may be reviewing them, how we're looking at them, and how the county's looking at them, and their status, instead of having 3 different sets of reports.
Well, we talk to each other. I was talking to Marshall about that this morning, and there is communications between us and the county and bank, so.
Yeah, so some of the mapping that's going on, for example, the map that Marshall did was kind of just more or less kind of where are they located kind of thing, and that's based on county data. County planning and development are also working together. Jay was actually at a meeting with those parties, kind of looking at some of the mapping, because some of these are just mapping where they're at, but then there's also kind of more detailed mapping about, okay, here's where it's located, but what, not just what parcels are they on, but what portions of the parcels are these projects on, but we do have that kind of detail. So it's more like various levels of detail in the mapping. Everybody's looking for the same set of data as far as I understand.
Okay, thanks.
I have to add, I'm surprised at this discussion because for the last 20 years that I've been here, this agency has led the community in trying to develop ways of financially assessing these projects. There has never been a time that any development project has not incorporated a thorough investigation of the impacts of those projects. There is no development that I ever saw that doesn't have at least 1 or 2 or 3 negative aspects to it. And what we do is when we are challenged by these projects, we bring in the experts. We call together people who know better about things like land use than we do. That's not our role. Our role is to develop a payment in lieu of tax agreement that supports these developments. So we are going to continue to reach out to these people and investigate wherever there is an opportunity to do that. And for us, the information on these maps are used internally by me, by any others who are looking at these things from the development perspective. We have a specific need for those information. It doesn't mean we don't coordinate. Doesn't mean we don't work with the Development Authority and the county. It is part of what this agency has done for a number of years. It sounds as though this is something unique and distinct because we happen to be talking about alternative energy. No, it's exactly what we do for air brake, for any other of the companies that we deal with. Why do I make that point? I make that point because your staff understands we are not the experts in a lot of these different areas. We do, though, know where those experts are, and we have to convene those experts. And I think at some point in time, we would certainly do that. That's the point that Dave just described, our reaching out to these individuals and trying to collect some kind of information which will help us present to you a development proposal which has considered many of these aspects. And forgive me if I sound a little defensive. I don't mean to do that. It's just the way we've done it for 100 years. This is not new.
I think the issue here is more, we're not talking about one or two, now we're accumulating up to 25, and what's the significance of these 25? You can work through one or two of those on a roadmap, but do we have the roadmap that takes us where these people need to go for approval process or whatever it is, that seems to be what we're talking about here, is the approval process and affect cost and effect of whatever these 25, maybe it'll be 50 by the time we get done here. I don't know what the number's gonna be, but the state has gone down the road and they're gonna demand these renewable energy projects. It's gonna happen somewhere. So if they never have laid out the roadmap for communities to deal with it.
And I've raised we've raised some concerns here, but let me jump ahead and just say, I'm excited. These concerns can be addressed. And there's huge opportunity. I mentioned the pilot tax revenue stream. It's huge. It's a huge advantage for the county. We can accommodate this as a viable building block of the community. It's just we've got some waters we got to navigate and do it. But at the end of the day, is it worth doing? You bet, every bit. I'm all for it. We've got lots of land that's not prime farmland that we can accommodate solar arrays and have the public support, I believe.
I'm not disputing what Paul is saying. There are a lot of elements that have to be considered here. The only point I make is we try to consider those under every circumstance. And we may miss something, but that's why committees are set up, so we can have this dialogue with you guys, and Bill can say, you're out of your mind, you forgot to do this, why didn't you talk to that one? And we would certainly proceed on that basis. And the only reason these 25, although it sounds like a huge number, and it is, the likelihood of 25 of these projects coming to fruition is really very small. There is an awful lot of things going on that, in my view, preclude the possibility of that kind of number. 10, maybe? Yeah, it's certainly possible.
I bring it up because we've talked about it through the Blue Island review on how much we spent and never recouped. We get into having the escrow amount from Apex towards the end of the project. And through the Article 10 process, there's a means to get developers to pay for our experts. There's a means.
Absolutely.
And we have to be cognizant of, if we need to bring in experts to help us, we should be making sure that at the front end of an application, we have money before we spend anything. So we're not spending money for one of those 10 projects that may not go. So that's one of my concerns.
We don't have to.
Under Article 10, they have to put money aside. Under Article 10, parties get a seat at the table to help determine what studies need to be done that the PSC will make the developer pay for.
So let's do this.
Okay, go ahead.
Now,
This is a very good discussion for our energy committee.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, these are the discussions that, rather than you spending all your time working with the individual projects, let's give us some idea of how we want to focus. That's where we kind of wanted to go. Thanks, Phil. Building grounds.
Building grounds, due to the time is of the essence, a couple weeks ago, Don held a meeting here in regards to Arsenal Street. There was some board members that were here and there were some that were tied in on the phone. There's certainly a lot of good input into the proposal, and I believe everybody, or most everybody agrees what we presented to Don, and Don presented to the potential people for Arsenal Street. He sent them a proposal, and it looks like we're very close, and that they should be here later today.
They are here.
They're here now, and we'll be having a discussion with them. Hopefully we can finalize something.
I think everyone got a copy of the proposal, right? I mean, I said it, so I'm assuming everybody did. I don't know what Kent or the chairman is thinking. Denise is here, maybe someone else from the Y. They wanted to respond to what we sent them. You may want to go to executive session to do that.
Looks like you got the next item is an executive session, so maybe we should knock that one out and then have them come in after that.
So you really need to talk about that in the IDA.
Yeah, it's on the
That's
IDA.
IDA, that's right. That's IDA, that's right.
Yeah, let's hold off on
Okay.
that to the idea.
That's IDA.
Governance?
Governance, in the light of a tight schedule, the agenda had gone out with a potential executive session. I'm not so sure if we necessarily need to. As I looked at our board evaluations and compared it to last year, and the committee did, there were probably a couple of areas we wanted to notate and maybe get some feedback on. We actually did at our meeting. David sat in on it, and we found it very helpful. So, but anyway, at the very least, we wanted to forward our progress with our evaluation this year compared to last year. As you look at it, I think you have to readily agree that it's an improvement. It's definitely an improvement. And it's not like it was problematic, but one of the areas I look at is when we get some truly defined disagreed categories. I think we need to address those a little bit or open it up for discussion.
After looking at it, what I'd like to do is, after the first of the year, we might even pull together a special meeting so that we can sit down and just direct it and find out where this is coming from.
I think that'd probably be good. I'd say less than having to go.
So we can put an hour or two together just for that reason, so that everybody's on the same path.
Yep.
And hopefully we're moving
And,
forward.
and there's nothing here that's a red light going off anywhere, but in light of our outside audit, which is really looking at governance more than financial, I felt we should, more than just rubber stamp this, we should have a little bit of discussion and move ourselves forward a little bit. So with that said, I'd say I would make a motion to move the governance committee findings to the board for acceptance, and we'll pick this up in a meeting after the first of the year when we can allocate a little more time.
Sounds good. Second? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thanks, Ed. Council reports, I know that Jay is currently at another meeting, and he's pretty good at sending emails and information out to everybody. If anyone has questions, Jay's always available. So I'll move right on to manufacturing. Dave, do you have?
Real quick, our safety program is continuing. We've had probably between 90 and 100% so far. There's one session actually going on today. We're watching for the next round of grant applications to be announced anytime between now and January. And related to manufacturing, as you may recall, we helped with 3 applications for manufacturers, a state CFA competition, plus application for the Ag Park infrastructure. We just found out that yesterday the dates for those award announcements were December 19th, so we'll know on December 19th if they've gotten funded, if they're successful.
Nice.
Dave, we got to back up the governance committee for one quick procedural change, and it comes to our lending policy, a change in our lending policy, reserved for bad debt. Lyle's put this forth, so let me put it over to him and he can explain why it's a simple modification, but we do need to have a resolution and pass it.
Yeah, at some point, the reserve for bad debt policy of the IDA was also adopted by the JCLTC, and it really doesn't apply to the JCLTC. The IDA is based on essentially a 3-year average of write-offs. We've had one write-off in the LDC at this point. So I'm recommending that we change it to an individual case-by-case basis that we recommend on an annual basis.
So in a nutshell, you're saying what he's proposing, if I understand this right, is when we reserve bad debt fund, we don't go to a 3-year
No,
average.
we don't, not for the LDC.
So let me read it as it was presented to us. Customer account balances are considered on a case-by-case basis. Management individually reviews all accounts receivable balances and based on an asset of current creditworthiness, estimates that accounts, if any, that will not be collected and uses that amount to establish annual reserve.
Are you looking for a motion to
Yes,
approve that
please.
policy? I will move. Second.
Questions, discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Listen. Marketing, Marshall.
Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to,
Remember, you're live streaming.
We're live streaming right now. Everything's going very smoothly. We briefly touched on 7 viewers. Although they seem to be, we've looked to 6, we go down to 3. So people are kind of logging in, checking it out, and then pretty quickly going to elsewhere. But it's functioning. We're monitoring it, and also these videos will be linked on the website as they usually are as well. So seems to be going smoothly. And the public hearing one, although that one it was very brief. The first test, we are able to do them mobily. So that's good news too. And we're a little bit ahead of the curve on this, and we're excited about that. Couple things again, real quickly. I was at in Albany last week for the Ready grant announcement. That was very interesting, and we're working through that. And critically, our website SSL is fully secured, which was one thing that we're having a little bit of issues with. But we're able to work that in with our hosting company. So we have a little padlocked website. We're fully secured on that, and we're excited. So I would like to keep it real brief. If anybody has any questions, give me a shout. Stop in my office. Lots to talk about. So thank you.
Unfinished business, Dan?
Not much, except to let you know that the audit, the controller's audit is ongoing. They're focused, as we mentioned earlier this morning, more on process right now. They have found a lot to like. I am very, very pleased. Every Friday night, I get a report from them in terms of what they're looking at and what they found and not found. And I think for the most part, and they're here, you're welcome to speak with them. For the most part, I think they found that what we're trying to accomplish here is being accomplished. They are going to whack away at us on a couple of different projects that they feel we didn't do a substantial amount of necessary investigation. We would argue that, but nonetheless, they're going to find something. But so far, so good would be the report. Exactly when they'll finish, I don't know. I think they're probably within maybe a matter of before Christmas is my guess. We won't hear anything for some time. And then, as they say, the stuff will hit the fan. I don't know exactly what that will mean, but they've been I have to say, they've been very good to work with. We've had no issues, and I'm very pleased about that. And the other thing is, Peggy, you might want to mention the fact that we will be starting, we hope, on the project in the back here shortly. So, in fact, we thought we would be in the middle of it already, but it didn't quite take place.
Counselor, anything for LDC?
Not for the LDC, no.
New business? Other unfinished business?
You want to, this is really an LDC issue, so. Very quickly, Marshall mentioned that he attended a meeting in Albany last week when details of the Governor's Ready program, also called the Lake Ontario Business Resiliency Program, surfaced. During that meeting, the county, Scott Gray, chairman, asked us, essentially instructed us to begin developing a loan program that would correspond with the governor's program. And so when we got back Monday, we were in the middle of trying to develop it, and it's been on the fly, and I apologize. I know I do this to you regularly. It's just, I frankly don't know what else to do. We put together in the last couple of days, staff, a program which we think will accommodate what it is that is being asked of us. It incorporates two portions, really. One is a loan program, and you've seen the details. I sent it to you last night. The other is, of course, an application to the IDA for sales tax benefits. Both of those items can be used to help offset the county's requirement of a 5% match. And so that's what's at the basis of trying to do this. These loans would be made through the resiliency program, would be made available to small business who have been impacted by the recent floods. And there are many. I have no idea. This is so open-ended. I have no idea what this is going to open the door for. We have limited funds here, as you all know. This is not a surprise. So we're going to try to work this program as best we can. I've put together some requirements, which I'd like you to review. I haven't even had time to run it to loan review or anybody. These are just really out of my head and looked at briefly by staff, but I would tell you that this is, in my personal view, fraught with danger. The original notion was to ask or offer to the state the IDA's ability to help administer the funds that they were going to provide. That was, we offered to do that role as the county's contribution and not charge for that. We would simply absorb that process and try to make it happen here locally. But that suddenly got expanded into we will provide a loan program and so on. Now, the interesting part about this is this was also made known to our state agency. And so I'm getting requests from other IDAs across the state who are impacted by the Ready grant thing as to how we're going to handle this. And so it's being looked at fairly carefully. Now, what's driving this is all of the applications have to be done by January 31st and in. Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but understand you have to submit engineering reports, you have to have plans, you have to have this and that. So whoever is going to submit these applications is going to have to do it on the run. So we wanted to get this in place as soon as possible to help incorporate the program so that it makes some sense. So I asked for your help in this, and I mean it. We're looking at this carefully. I hope I've not opened up Pandora's box. I don't know exactly how else to deal with it. So thoughts and comments from you guys would be.
It's my understanding that this READY program requires that local governments contribute 5% towards the project.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're trying to do is give them a mechanism, let's say sales tax exemption, and if that sales tax exemption equals the 5% local match, the state, if I'm correct, will now accept that as the local match.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So
if we waive a fee for the pilot application, that's also counts towards the match.
Okay. So in there, I think you had the maximum loan at $40,000, and I forget the terms off the top of that. How many loans could we do if we had application for $40,000?
Through LDC?
How many could we do?
Is this through the, no, this would be IDA.
No,
Sales
that
tax.
would be the LDC.
So
The sales tax would
But
be.
that's what I was confused with, is it the sales tax or is it the LDC?
Two separate potential programs.
The problem is, the controller is concerned about using IDA funds for vehicles which are not IDA projects. These are really not IDA projects.
It's really, that really is prohibited.
But if we can pull it up, is this qualify for RLF where we have the most funds? Because if it's micro enterprise, 0.8%, or 0.8 loans or whatever.
I know so little about this, Rob,
But I mean,
How much
if it's
money
all
do we have available
RLF,
to fund
yeah.
this program? Because I don't think we have enough to even scratch the surface of what is going to be asked for.
Because the terms fall more under
I wouldn't have
revolving
done it.
loan.
Okay,
I wouldn't have done it.
so
We'd have to get that from staff too, because will this qualify under the RLF qualifications if we can make a special
Maybe we.
considerations?
For funds.
Because we have the most considerable funds that are RLF that are not being used. And
Well-
these could be used towards presumably
I
economic
guess
development.
my concern is if we can work it through the IDA, where we're giving the sales tax abatement at no application fee, and that covers their 5%.
Yeah.
Why would we want to go beyond that? I mean, our goal should be able to come up with a mechanism that the 5% is met for these projects, so they can go out and get the other 95% through the READY programs. Am I understanding this correctly?
No, you're understanding it absolutely correct.
So
Maybe the threshold could be is if they meet the 5%
of
mechanism.
5% through the two things.
Yeah.
But I'm back to what you said. Can we do this project through the IDA and grant an exemption if it is for job retention? Isn't it? These are only for commercial.
Well, the LDC has the RLF fund, which is
They're commercial,
pretty
but they're-
substantial.
They're retail too, most of them are.
Most of them are retail.
Most of the ones you're gonna get involved with are retail.
And
The forgiveness there is, this is a tourism.
It does have a tourism
Yeah, there
exemption.
is a tourism.
So you're really looking at two different elements here. The IDA needs to be considered, in my personal view, as a separate entity, and they'll have to apply separately. They'll have to apply for sales tax benefit, and we can do that because it is a tourist-related vehicle. I'm kind of looking at Joe for comment. On the other hand, the LDC has the flexibility with funds. The IDA does not. The IDA cannot use funds that are not specifically oriented toward an IDA project. And that's why this balancing act I've been trying to put together here is so flimsy in my personal view. And why do we do that, Paul? Not because I promised anybody to do it, but somebody else did. And in front of the governor, God and everyone else, that we would do this. So
I
this
think
is,
we can craft something where, like Paul's saying, it's an either or. I mean, we need to meet a minimum threshold. I think that's where we want to step up. And
Well,
the
first job
the minimum threshold is,
easy to do.
hey, you can offer some sales tax exemption and waive a pilot agreement, and that helps, you know, kind of
That's a
access.
no-brainer. We can do that.
To the similar question, how many loan applications have we received for the Clayton redevelopment program, or
None.
whatever we want to call it?
None.
So this is, my opinion is gonna fall under a similar, nobody's gonna come to us for money. There's already local communities, I know of 2 of them on the lake that have formed coalitions in their own communities to determine effects, how to get money. The local governments are helping. I mean, people
You're
help
absolutely
themselves. They're not gonna come to us and fill out an application
Well,
and make a loan.
This is
One person
another,
may.
this is a fairly substantial hoop they're gonna have to jump through. Now, they may
And there's
just
a
come
deadline
to us
here,
and
too.
say, look, we want an application for the IDA so we can forgive sales tax. That would be easy to do, relatively speaking.
Sales
And-
tax on labor, Joe.
sales tax on labor, no.
Not in New York.
Isn't there, maybe I read this wrong, but this program is, 200,000 is the max, I think, per request, and don't they have to meet half of that?
40 or 50%.
They have to be, 50% is the requirement. In
And
other
that
words,
might
if it's
be what-
$200,000 project, they gotta come up with 100,000.
So that's where they're gonna think, they're gonna start looking to us.
They're gonna
So
look
maybe
to
to
us.
Rob's point, you're gonna, I think you're gonna see more of these because, and they're gonna be a higher dollar, like Paul is saying, so.
The thing about the state program, it doesn't even require an equity piece. So I'm sitting here looking at this thing and saying they can get $200,000, and it says nothing about the fact that they had to throw $10 in it. So at the end of the day, what happens when we get into this? They award this thing by the state, but the state always has the option of backing out. We put in money early on, and we tried to secure it by the project. Well, forget it. I mean, that's not going to work. So you fall back to personal guarantees. Really, it's an unsecured loan. So we're the ones, my personal view, that are way out on a limb, and somebody behind us with a saw. I really, I'm really uneasy. It's not that we shouldn't do something to help. Don't misunderstand.
Dave, where do you want this to go? A committee or back to the board or what? Because I know you pressed for time and we got a lot of problems left.
I think staff should continue to work to try to get a handle on how to make this program work and if we can make it work. I certainly don't have a problem with the sales tax exemption. If they gotta get to, I'm leery about being in second or third position with our money. But back to the question, how much do we have access to? And
I think we have a loan review committee hearing potentially coming up unless it's canceled because of the holidays.
I agree with Paul. Let's just
push it down.
Have staff continue to work on the thing.
And maybe if we have a special meeting.
I'll help anywhere I can.
I know the timeframes are tight, but if we have a special meeting for Hoya, maybe we should target both these things for that meeting.
Yeah.
I'd like to know for sure that we can legally.
I'm gonna personally
do
get
the
some
sales
feedback
tax
on a couple
exemption
communities
because that
that
could
are
get us
struggling with this, 'cause I think
halfway
that's helpful.
to their.
Looking on the
their
outside
local
here.
government.
Very helpful.
Everybody's
What do
building
people
up
need?
on it.
Yeah,
And also
that's
what I don't need.
That should be our main goal, trying to come up with help with the local government.
The only thing I would say to you guys is we have some very tight time constraints. Otherwise, this has no value whatsoever. Because if projects are not looking at this as a possibility soon, it won't work for them because they have to have all of this stuff
Well,
lined
if
by
you're
the
talking
end of
about the
January.
sales tax exemption, they already qualify if it's for tourism. So
Yeah.
anybody can apply. for the
We can
sales
do
tax
that
exemption.
easily.
Yeah.
So you don't need a policy for that,
No.
other than we're gonna waive our
They
application.
just gotta fill out an application.
So that's the only, because right now, currently, they can apply for that.
Yes.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, it appears our problem that we're having with this whole process is direction coming from county government that is saying to us, we need to open up our loan fund balance, whatever we have, to put on the table to help some of this above and beyond the 5% contribution.
I think,
Right?
I think, Ed, what happened was when I offered the agency services to act as a conduit to help the state administer these funds locally, that was expanded to the point where we'll offer loan funds and take care of all that stuff.
Which we're really not in a cash position to be able to do without some.
I think Rob is right. I think what we're gonna find is we're not gonna get a lot of applicants. This is gonna be so damn complicated by the time they get done with it. And, in the process we've gotta go through, let alone what the state's gotta go through. We can't move frankly on any of this. Everything has to be contingent on state approval. And even then, because the state put so many caveats in their legislation, if you've read it, this whole funding could disappear.
And I think if you craft a loan program and set up some parameters that require them to have gone so far in their state application before you can approve the loan, you've got a process in place. And then people aren't gonna be coming to you for a loan unless they know they're gonna satisfy the state requirement.
That's what I've tried to do with this thing.
That's very important.
So the timeline may actually solve the problem for us. This January 31st timeline may.
The only thing is
Other
I
than
don't,
not taking no action between now and then. I think that's the only thing.
I don't want-
develop a program.
I don't want Mr. Gray and Bill's contemporaries over there to think that we are not trying to be responsive because we're accused of that all the time. It's just that this board has to protect what it is that we accomplish at the same time. And we'll be the ones out on the limb, not anybody else. So, but we need to resolve this.
So when Mentions Marina came to us for a micro enterprise loan for 40,000, a revolving loan fund for $40,000 to renovate it, it would have been reviewed as a normal application.
Exactly.
Well, mine would be an RLF, but not even a micro.
Which-
Whatever one they qualify
but
for.
Paul's right.
But those policies are in place,
So the
So
real thing
LDC
is,
already has policies and they
So-
can also.
so the real issue, first thing is, does anyone have a problem if one of the programs under the ready is they're looking for a sales tax exemption, that we agree or adopt a policy that we will accept from anyone that has a ready application, that we would accept an application for sales tax exemption at no charge.
If they qualify as a tourist.
Yeah, I was gonna say they can't be
If
like.
they otherwise qualify.
Okay.
That would be.
They have to meet the other thresholds.
So can I make a motion that we establish that if an applicant comes forward seeking the sales tax exemption?
But that would be the right thing to do.
That's not only about floors, just so they can, you send it to the supervisors and say, let your people know. That's very good. No, I don't. When we get to the idea, I'll make a motion that we waive application fees for all of tourism-related ready applications. Would that be accurate, Joe?
Well, I'd say any application that otherwise qualifies for sales tax relief.
Okay. Okay. We'll do that at the IDA. Perfect. And then we get that, and then.
That'll get started.
And like you're telling Don,
And then
send
we
that to
gotta-
the 4 town supervisors that have towns that are affected and we've done something.
We also have a revolving loan fund in the LDC.
Correct.
So if we wanted to develop a loan program, kind of like what we did for Clayton area.
It's a similar type of pattern. It's
We can do
basically-
that, we can pattern that out after what.
But see, the thing is, I don't think there needs to be a co-joining of ready. Ready, whether they qualify for ready or not, the RLF still is available. They don't have to say, I've been affected by flooding. You can come in for any reason you want if you qualify for the RLF. I don't think we should join them. We're complicating matters by.
I know we are, but it's the promise made that we're trying to accommodate.
Well, I think the simplicity is in the LDC, we just let, again, these towns, there's 4 towns or 5, whatever it is, affected by Lake Ontario lakefront flooding. Know there are availability through whatever qualifications we currently have on the books.
That's
it. That's it.
That's the second.
Nothing more, nothing less. I mean, it just let people know. Frankly, I don't think 80% of the general public know of the viability of our agency to offer lending under certain qualifications.
And maybe that would be a good point.
Just a simple thing, it's
To
marketing.
expand.
Where's the?
And we have an obligation, by the way, to try to service our local business. I mean, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is a reason to consider this as a viable option. I just want you guys to know that if we use this as a blueprint, there are going to be some issues related to it. I'm not exactly sure what those are going to be, but it's not our process 100%. When it's not, I get nervous. So, anyway, so the process, what do you want me to do? You want me to resend this and have you guys look at that? We convene a meeting? Do you want to, I think, canvas?
I think Paul had the idea of from what I'm hearing, we're going to basically go with our normal loan programs.
In LDC.
In LDC, and, people apply, then we can apply.
Let them know.
And then we're gonna have a resolution in the IDA that states, basically, we're willing to waive the fees for anyone looking for sales tax abatement and like that, as long as they're qualified for the ready program.
Right.
And also meet the other qualifications of sales tax exemption.
Yes.
So those 2 qualifications, now we've met all of our processes, and all we need to do is let the public know, which is 5 town supervisors. I
It
think,
goes a little bit more than that because
well, you can copy the world, but it's.
Motion to adjourn the LDC.
I make a motion.
Second.
All in favor, aye? With that, I'll call to order the Jefferson County Industrial Development Agency meeting for December 5th, 2019. Privilege of the floor.
Okay, we just asked that the folks from Energy, if there's any additional questions for them, it probably should be quick, but they've got some other appointments this morning. Maybe you can move that up on the agenda.
Sure.
I just got one operational question. I know your plant's like 60 megawatts and the fort uses how much?
Well, an annual average about 23 megawatts or so. So peaks at 28 megawatts in the summer.
Do you sell the other excess or what do you?
Or don't you generate it full
Yeah.
capacity?
We do, we sell the excess, and the 60 megawatts is a gross,
Good.
gross number. We use some of that power in-house to
Sure.
operate the plant. But the balance of the net generation that we do not sell to the Army, we actually sell into the grid
Okay,
as wholesale power.
thank you. I've got a quick question as long as you're there. Your cost to produce energy, what do you find under sustainable practices? Roughly a ballpark figure, you're putting that out there at. For instance, when you put onto the grid, are you selling for 6 cents a kilowatt? Is that proprietary? You can't share it compared to the Army's 20 megawatts at 4 cents a kilowatt? How does that break out?
Well, there are really three revenue streams that support the operation of the project. One are the revenues from the Army contract. The second are the renewable energy credits that we sell to the state of New York through a contract with NYSERDA. And then the third are the wholesale electricity revenues that we generate from selling that excess power. And, you know, any of you could go on the New York ISO website at any point in time, and you can see what the wholesale rates are in this zone E of New York ISO. And it, on an annual average, is probably in the, we'll call it the $25, $26 per megawatt hour range for that wholesale electricity. So,
In other words, if you put it on a wholesale, it wouldn't sustain the operation.
on its own, no, and that's why, you know, we were very concerned about the Army contract. If it was gonna be eroded, that's a very significant part of the revenue stream for the project.
25%, 30% of the total revenue?
The
Army
Army,
contract.
I would say probably 40%, Bill,
40%.
Yeah.
probably around 40%.
Mr. Chairman, should we move to the resolution for re-energy away from our normal agenda so that we can be on the way?
Sure.
Number 2 under council.
Oh,
It's number
Page
2.
100.
Right.
Well, I think it's 100. I don't know. It's been revised 16 times.
Sorry, well, I can tell you that my computer just died.
Here, David. Here's a printout. That's why I bring them.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the resolution for re-energy so we can get to discussion. Or you can read it into the record.
So we have resolution number 1205, 2019-02. It's amending trust indenture for Re-Energy Black River LLC solid waste disposal revenue bonds. And before we get into this, I want to say that I'm going to abstain from both the discussion and the voting on this as Re-Energy with one of my clients.
Does he do good work?
He can't count.
Great.
That's what I mean.
So I think Paul made a motion to accept it,
So we have a motion.
and I'll second
And a
that,
second.
if you hadn't already had.
Discussion.
No further from me.
No further discussion. Roll call vote.
There is no roll call for that resolution.
Yes,
There
I
wasn't
would.
one built in.
I would like one,
Okay, I'll
please.
use this sheet. Dave,
Abstain.
John,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
and Lisa's absent.
Resolution carries. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all very much.
Merry Christmas.
Now we want to go outside and talk about it.
We received minutes from our last meeting of November 7th. Was there any additions and/or corrections?
Now accept as presented, or make a motion to accept as presented. Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. I'd entertain a motion to accept the audit report as provided by Bowers and Company.
So moved.
Second. Discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Treasurer's report.
Page 66 of, I don't think the numbers changed in the beginning, right? You revised this like 4 times. Not you, but whoever, someone. I think it's on page 66. Mine says 66. Okay, so start on page 66. The balance sheet. The total has decreased about 86,000. Most significantly, about 3/4 of that was from the 146 Arsenal Street expenses, which are being tracked separately, and then the balance of it was unrestricted funds. Everything else is very negligible. Other assets decreased an additional 3,000 for 89,000. Total, these are 5-month periods. Current liabilities, there's virtually no change, and the liabilities and capital, the fund balance, has decreased 90,000 in the aggregate. Page 67. Our break-even target is about 79,000 per month. We have a slow start, but we do have the RCI coming in soon, and it looks as though there's pilots up for resolution soon. So I think there'll be some significant large values that will add to the balance sheet, but they're not linear, they're one time, but the RCI alone is 280,000.
We split that.
Well, but I mean, right now, it's the 279 is on here, and it goes in the other half on the other side, but we do have a slow start, but there's some significant revenues, particularly quite soon in the future. Under operational expenses, we're about 83,000 a month for our break even. On a linear basis, which nothing is perfect, but we're about 20,000 over on a linear basis. On a monthly basis, most of it is from early expenses for 146 Arsenal, which again are coupled into here. Again, those probably won't reoccur each month. You can skip to page 69, which is the balance sheet. Quick assets are down 295,000 from the prior month. Receivables are up 190,000 from the prior month. The miscellaneous stuff is came about 20K from prior month. Total assets we already reported lower by 89,000 from prior month. Liabilities previously reported no change from prior month, and liabilities capital negative 189. 71. Excuse me. 71 is just again, Lyle's been keeping the 146 Arsenal separate. I know we're talking about that later today, so please account for page 70. I had a question, Lyle, on page 76, I hadn't seen this name before, Selective Insurance.
That's our new insurance company for liability.
I just hadn't seen the name before, it was a pretty big number.
It's a $32,000 number, however, had we stayed with Liberty Mutual, it probably would have been 80,000.
Okay, that's fair. Just
because of the vacant buildings.
New vendor, I never saw it before. I thought of that.
Yep, we are there.
Wasn't a side business.
Not yet.
Page 78. Just a snapshot of our loans. Again, our receivables are quite low as an overall percentage of our outstanding loan fund. I think the only one that we'll talk about is signing this board. Mr. Ricks is probably the highest risk we have right now, but they are doing sort of interest only.
Yeah, they're interest only.
And they're only 1 month behind, so that's good. Taste of Design comes on and off.
Well, they're down to 1.
Okay, so they're down to 1, so that's cool. Nothing else to report under RLF. There's no delinquencies, and the city loan fund has always been kept up to date. Pages 79, 80, and 81 are just snapshots of all of the loans that are available and their current status and their current amounts that were when they were issued and when they're done. So thanks for that. That report's actually quite nice to be able to look at.
That's a required report now, so we're improving it.
Puts it in a nice spot. Treasurer's report concluded. I would make a motion to accept it as I presented it.
Very nice. Well, it's actually interesting.
Second. 1 second. Questions, discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Governance committee?
Here again, the same thing. We've got the evaluation before you at page 84. I would refer continuance and discussion to our January board meeting, and move that we board adopt committee's findings for the evaluation. With that caveat, we'll pick it up in January and have a little more detail.
I'll second
All in favor, aye?
it. Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Unfinished business.
One comment I would make on that too, in fact, is here again, good improvement on the internal work.
Mr. Chairman, I move we enter executive session to discuss the disposition of real property and invite staff and Mr. Berto as chair of that, LDC member.
Good counsel.
And council.
I know you want to stay. I don't want to forget you.
LDC.
I'm giving you a break.
Yes.
You might do something.
I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing disposition of real property, shallow real property.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Gentlemen, for 2 minutes.
Absolutely.